Beyond picturing what we have done once before of talking about revolutionary thinking being like a high wire kind of act and doing it without a net, I was going ahead and really say, since it's a weird day, how about go beyond that? It's even a kind of subversive progression beyond doing it without a net would be is doing it without a trapeze. The redoing was bring somebody back up on the high wire to something that we had mentioned before, the triaxial approach redux. The three forces that you can always find, three potentials, the three extant ways in which energy can be transformed and moved about at the three-dimensional level, is look at it as another kind of arrangement, at least verbally, is look at it as being the pros, the cons, and for a second I'm going to say this and then we're going to snatch it back from the jaws of death. Let us say, like in the political sense, for those of you watching this at home in your spare time, it has no political significance whatsoever. But to use the kind of hardwired examples to then take them and twist them into our own nefarious idiomatic uses, is either pick out politics, religion, or air conditioning work, I guess. And today I think we'll stick with political examples. In the political examples in the field, you would have the pros and the cons. Of course, they'd be called something else, the Christian Democrats and the Christian Republicans, or the Socialists. You know how that goes. But they would be tempted then, as it sometimes turns up out there in life, the pros, the cons, and the independents. People even in our country, for instance, as you all know, the political scene is run by, owned by those two well-known, thriving concerns known as the Democrats and the Republicans. But there are people who will stand up, get themselves on radio or TV, and they will announce, I am an independent. And every now and then, someone even runs on the basis of being an independent, which is about the same thing as running and listing your name as being anonymous. But at any rate, what I want you to realize before we snatch it back from the jaws of, when I say death, of course, the jaws of inoperable ennui, so we'll make some use of it. But people have used, of course, I didn't make up the term independent, but even politically, people will say, I'm an independent. And as far as I know, there is no registered or serious independent party as such in this country. But people will say that they're independent, that they are neither for the Democrats or Republicans, that they do not agree with either one. They do not agree. They may even take it further and say, I do not agree necessarily, almost in principle, with any organized politics. That if you have a group of people, they're going to become so entrenched with their own vested interests, they become so self-serving, that even if they had ideas as part of their party platform with which I agreed, I would not be a member of that party because you can't breathe. They're too constricting. I consider myself an independent. And that sounds nice. But now, all of you should be aware of this. It's got nothing to do with politics, because I could have picked out religion. We could have talked about such things as religion splitting after a certain time into different branches. Pros and cons I'm using for a certain reason, but we could pick out religions and say that they will split up very shortly at some time. And they'll become called orthodox and reform, or progressive and conservative. They will split. They have to. For it to live, your lungs have got to split into your respiratory system, your blood pressure. The electrical energy that drives the brain has got to divide itself into the pros and cons, or you could not breathe. Your lungs vote yes and no every time they inhale and exhale. Your blood pressure, I know they got numbers with a slash over it and all that crap, but all it is chocolate and vanilla. Positive and negative, yes and no, pro and con. But back to the political scene for a second. You would have these two groups, and I know they're not only called pro and con, but just stick with me. There could be Democrats and Republicans, and a growing number of independents. And if there was a widespread poll taken, you might get still 40% of the people say they're Democrats, and 40% say that they're Republicans, and then you would have 20% that might say we are independents. And they may even try, which happens many times throughout history and going on right now, more so in Europe than here, but it's not important, that they will even try to get together. They don't normally call themselves independents, but what they're saying is we do not like the two prevailing possibilities, the two prevailing parties. And in Germany or somewhere else, it could be the Communists and the Christian Democrats, or in England, the Labour and whatever the other one is, party. But notice, here's what you got to see. No matter what the field was, whether it was religion, called something else, or whether it was in politics, the independents are not truly independent. That is not the purpose. That is not what's going on in life. Now, the way in which independent would be used in its most expansive sense when they're trying to do it, and let us say that the person who are describing themselves as an independent and giving their attitude and their views on politics, they would even, if I was playing the part of an ordinary interrogator or reporter and saying, well, you're an educated man, you're well known, or you've written books, and at one time you were a member of the Democratic or Republican Party. Yes, I was. Well, what happened? And he might, in a way that would strike the ordinary mind as being somewhat insightful, intelligent, would try and describe what it means to be more independent. Not that I believe that there is indeed some evil energy behind the Democrats or the Republicans. It is, and he would begin to describe what would, even in a political sense, at least metaphorically, begin to sound almost like an attempted scientific approach. And with a little coaching on my part, being the reporter, I might begin to say things like, well, an independent, although we're not organized, I have friends that feel like I do, and we talk about it, we're not really a party, but if we were, we would say, if I may speak for some of my friends in this kind of attitude, this guy might say, we try to take more of an objective approach, whereas the Republicans, we know throughout the years, or the Social Democrats, or the Communists, or whoever you were, that there is a certain expected framework, agenda they have. And I'd have to agree if I was there. No. Well, as opposed to that, you would have the Republicans, and they're saying, we favor the trickle-down theory if we're going to take the economic spot within politics, and we try and preserve the wealth and the capital of people and let it all trickle down, because if people in the higher echelons of the economic spectrum, capital, industry, if they're going to prosper, everybody's going to prosper. They've got to, because industry cannot work without white, blue-collar workers, people down the ditches, whereas the Democrats are so-and-so. So they're describing what? Pro and con in that particular way. And then this independent would say, as I said, with a little coach, I might get him to say, well, we try to take more of an objective approach, as opposed to the automatic, they sometimes want to say knee-jerk when they attack each other, which simply means mechanical. As soon as a Republican says, I'm in favor of so-and-so, and if there's a Democrat there and there's a TV camera, and they turn around to him, he's immediately going to say, oh, no. Even if he don't know what he's going to say, oh, no. It's pro and con because it's not politics, of course. It's the flow of energy. But he will say, oh, no, us Democrats don't believe that. If they're pro, we're con. I just hadn't thought about it in detail. Give me a second. So this independent would try and describe something that would sound as though it were objective, as opposed to him mechanically, if he were a Democrat, if he were a pro, whatever the subject was, as opposed to him being a pro in whatever was raised by the other side, the cons, as opposed to him going, oh no, at least to some degree, I must disagree. Even before you finish, I know we'll disagree. Then the so-called independent, at least the ipsedixit independent, would attempt to say, as opposed to that, we are more objective. But here, sir, why lie to us? I mean, why not? But it is not true. When you have this surfacing in life, which it does in politics, it does in religion. And I bring this back out on the basis that we so often around here are talking about the polarized nature of life, and it's always, the green army against the purple army, the tall people against the short people, the wet philosophy against the dry philosophy. That is what strikes at the mainstream of the intellectual viewpoint of humanity. And anything going on, if it is alive, there's some kind of struggle going on. The Super Bowl. It's the National League against the American League. It's not the National League against the Girl Scouts. It's got to be two parties that have some interest in this, and assuming you have an interest, as soon as you hear, hey, there's a big game, you don't say which team is playing. That's not a game. If they say, oh boy, we got some excitement over here, and you say, who's playing? Oh, we don't have sports over here in our kingdom. We have politics. Just as good. And you say, okay, well, I'm here. And they say, there's an election next week. And you say, what person is running? What party? You understand? You don't even think about it. Don't look so nonplussed. That was so simple. I guess I should have said it was simple to start with. It is anything you're interested in, you know there's some kind of struggle. I mean, if you just turn on the radio, if you want real subtle, if not stupid. I mean, it's subtle. If you're flipping through the dial and they say it's the countdown for this week's top 40 hits, and we're at number 3, and you think, oh, good, I missed all the shelf, and I get right down to it, and they say, coming up, and just 2 more songs will be the number 1. And let's say that you're interested in music, the way that some people are interested in sports, and other people are interested in politics, and other people in religion. You will have, if you're really interested, and you tell people in the car, you drive along, shh, wait a minute, let's hear this. You've got some interest in what's going to be the number 1, because there is a kind of contest going on. The announcer may say, it's sort of surprising, because for 2 weeks with such and such record has been number 1. You go, yeah, I know that one. And they say, and this one was only made the top 10 in the last 72 hours. Oh. And then you begin to guess. You've heard it. Is one new song you really like? It is always a matter that there are pros and cons. It's just not thought of in that manner. But if your energy here is being caught by something going on, as simple, as crude as may sound to be the countdown for the top 40 songs this week, or something as important as the election of a new president, it is always on the basis of the pros and the cons. That is, you have some interest in it. And your interest, as far as you're concerned, is pro. And if it comes out that, wait a minute, you sit there and you listen, you went through all the commercials, and they said, da-da-da-dum, and here it is, the number 1 song this week, Don Ho doing, and you go, what? You feel as though there has been an unfair election. You feel as though you have just tuned in at the tail end of the Super Bowl, and they say, what an ending, what an ending. You wouldn't believe it. In the last 10 seconds, the Republicans won. You understand? You have an interest, and the interest must be rational. And it will be. The interest, whatever you're tied to, is going to be on the basis that there is some combat, there is some conflict. I can go through a string of names and just dismiss the ones that you don't like. Well, that doesn't apply. They all apply. For those of you that missed one of our Friday theorems, that from a more plenary view, all matters are collateral matters. I think I'll stop there. But at any rate, well, pretend I stopped there. You have some interest. Let me put it to you this way. You have some interest in everything you have an interest in. Does that clear it up? If you have an interest in what the top records are this week, you have such an interest. If you have an interest in, are the conservatives going to win out over the reformers in my church, in my bird-watching society? If you have an interest in that, there is no doubt. I will not deny it. I'll admit it up front. You have an interest in it. But if you do, you've got to understand an interest is based upon always the polarized nature of being alive. Because if you're alive, you've got some interest. If you've got no hobbies, if you've got a tin ear, if you're deaf, if you're dumb, you're blind, you're impotent, you got at least one interest. We'll assume. I guess I'm pushing. We'll assume you've got one interest in life, and that is staying alive. Or maybe you got some interest in life wishing you were dead. What I'm getting to is you do not have to have a hobby. You can be almost a walking example of blandness. You could be the poster boy for beige. But if you're alive and in some way functioning, no hobbies, no interest in life, you've got one interest. Like I said, I'll admit after putting myself in that corner, then to say you've got an interest in staying alive, I guess some of you would go, why? But well, you shouldn't say that because by reports I hear that they're middle class Presbyterian Republicans that feed themselves and wear safety belts, just like ordinary people, and pretend that they haven't got something to live for. I don't know. Can't ever tell. If you're alive, there is a spark of interest, if you're sane, and at the very least, if you don't like music, art, politics, sports, your interest is in staying alive. So the pro and con is on the basis of simply staying alive, and you do not have to be part of the Bee Gees band, but staying alive. In the triaxial arrangement redux, trying to look at it another way, that you have the arrangement where the pros and the cons, if we're talking about politics, again, the Democrats and Republicans, but now, after we talk this much, take it pro and con for a little while. Because that way you can shift back and forth and you don't have to think, well, my mind keeps wanting to perk up when you say Democrats versus Republicans or Reform versus Orthodox. Take it the pros and the cons, because then you can take any position you want to in whatever field we come up with it or that you might imagine. The dance is going on between the predominant two parties, the two predominant branches of the religion, whatever it is, the pros and the cons, but taken at the widest possible mechanical view. That is, that people pop up saying, I'm an independent, and sometimes in sizable numbers. The independents are not actually a third part of a viable, active triaxial dance. Because it is really like this. What it would be called the independents are actually waiting outside the dance going on between the pros and the cons, waiting for somebody to trip, waiting to overtake one of them, waiting to cut in and to take the pros or the Democrats and to push them out of the way, which does happen. It happens in politics all the time. Surely all of you have read that much. Even the parties now, I'm not going to try to give you a history lesson in American politics, but the Democrats and Republicans now are not what they were 100 years ago. By any means. They even changed names. But what happens is, if it was politics, and we're going to say Democrats, Republicans, and the Bull Moose Party, the Treetop Party, I'm going to say Bull Moose, or some of you might really take it as a history lesson, and say that there was a Democrats and Republicans somewhere, and the Treetop Party. And the Treetops were the 10% of the population. If the day comes, you leave town, you come back, and the prevailing parties are the Democrats and the Treetops, you do understand this. The Treetops are now the Republicans redone. That is, they didn't push the Republicans off and tell them, follow those lemmings off the cliff, and they're all gone. It is not that the independents, or in this case the Treetops, went over there and defeated. Now you should know that, because that's not the way this works. So that's what we were talking about last time. You don't throw everybody out. The cost is too great. If the independents break into the dance, it is not that they finally get to the point that they just get so pushy, so obnoxious, or whatever it is, they find the Republicans walk away, and there's left the Democrats. And so now the prevailing parties are the independents and the Democrats. For one thing, in city life, independents, just in any language, will not work for long. They will have to change their name, which is another story. It's not much of a story, but it's, you ever think about it. That even if now, if there's some way, in spite of what I just said, if the independents in some way, let us say, just so I can make it very quickly, that the independents decide, well, we've had enough being independent and hanging around the edges. Let's go in there and we'll just attack the Republicans and kill them, or we'll kidnap them, or we'll put them in boxes and send them out of the country. That they actually get rid of them. To where it is now, the Democrats look around and they're only opposition. If they're the pros, the only cons left are the independents. And so those two have to start dancing. Those two have to start competing, or appear to compete, for elections. The little side trip I was going to point out, and this happens, these independents, normally things are arranged that they wouldn't even stand for one election called independents. They don't know why, because if people know why they do anything. But somewhere in their great wisdom, they'd sit around and realize, do you realize that we are now the loyal opposition? We are now the second largest party in this country, in this kingdom. And somebody would say, you know what, we ought to change our name from independent. In spite of the fact, you would think that somebody would sit around and go, well, wait a minute. Back when the Republicans and the Democrats had everything sewed up, getting all the graft, getting all the fun, and we were locked out. What made us? How did we get where we are? We kept saying we're independent. We're neither pro or con. We're not on either side. It's the name, the whole concept of being independent that got us here. Why would we want to, just toss that away? That'd be like suicide. Now, you could say that from one view, but it's not true, because that is not the way life works. Contraire. As soon as they realize, well, we've done away with the Republicans. They're all gone. We tricked them. Anyway, it's now us and the Democrats. Somebody would immediately say, before they ever got the name on a ballot normally, we ought to change our name. And there would be no serious resistance, such as I said, about that somebody you would think would go, wait a minute, why would we throw away the name independent? Because that surely is what got us here. It just won't do. The human intellect cannot go in and now, of course, look at pro, con, and independent, like non-aligned, non-involved. They're not going in. It says Democrats. You got two parties now, Democrats and independents. And the guy goes in. He used to be a Republican, or had some interest. And he looks down, the Republicans are gone. Maybe somebody says, well, they left town. It's now the Democrats and independents. The independents, if he looks at that, almost doesn't exist. Not in the sense that it was intended to mean, and not in the sense that if this were to happen, that an ordinary intellect would want to react to it. It's like, what the hell does it mean? It's like it's the Democrats. They got two columns, and everybody's used to it. Normally go in, it says Democrats and Republicans, pros and cons. So guy goes in, he hadn't been keeping up, he goes in to vote, and it says Democrats and independents, these two columns. It's almost as though he looks like Democrats, and over here it's like, it's as though one half of the ballot sort of, fell off the face of the earth. Like, independent, he might read the name, but independent, what the hell does that mean? You don't know whether they're against the Democrats, you don't know what they're against. Independent. Independent people, independent thought, independent philosophy, and the ordinary dance in the city has no lasting validity, because it is not, at the polarized level, it is not an active participant in the dance. That is, although the independents, go back to my political example, would be saying and be actively out in the streets, out in shopping malls, trying to get votes. But in a quite real sense, they are not really trying to break into the dance. Now, the people involved don't know that, of course. You all know that. It's not some kind of conspiracy. They really believe it. But that part of life's body that would come out and be called independent within this political scenario I'm making up, the independents, that is this third, this presently non-aligned, non-participant in the pro and con dance or whatever it was, is not actually trying to break into the dance. They're not actually trying to overcome the pros or the cons. They think they are. They say they are. But they are not. That is, life is not trying to replace one of these forms of energy, the Democrats and Republicans, by this independent. Not as long as it's being called independent. Now, life won't it replace when the time comes it does replace one of them, and that's when they think, we should come up with a better name than independent. That doesn't really say much. That doesn't say what we stand for. But at the time it's going on, this is leading somewhere. At the time it's going on, that which is called independent, that which would defend itself, insist we are independent of thought. They are not. And to any degree that they are, they're even more irrelevant, which is not the point at city level, because being irrelevant at city level is irrelevant. Well, that's like being a rebel at city level. And out in the street and holler, I don't like the way things operate. Boy, that takes life back, which is not the real point. That really takes people back. That is, the ones who do it. Then the stars say, you feel much better? They go, yes. And then they go home, have a joint, get a half pint, watch TV. I was going to ask that perhaps that some of you wild-eyed Melindas could fly on off with us a bit higher, a bit further. There is a possibility, there is a reality possible for a few, for people was so inclined, that there is a reality behind the idea of independent. I, of course, could be using it now as being synonymous with what we've been calling revolutionist thinking or new thinking, but it would be a reality. Now, let me go back to their words, since I've tried to get you to see that they are not, as always, they are not truly indicative of what they're saying. They can't be. But there would be a reality, I'm suggesting, possible, way up somewhere, even above where the crowd could see up there in the tops of the tent. But what would independent thinking be? It's not. And it is not, certainly, hanging around the edges there of the dance floor hoping that the Democrats or the pros or the cons are going to trip or get sick or finally pass out or get so old they wear out, or maybe you can shoot them or do. That's not it. Because if it happens, surely you see it. The independents then dive in and they become either the pros or the cons, just according to who was left. If the Democrats fall down and the independents get in, the independents are now Republicans. They can call themselves gold-leaved angels. But if the Republicans fall out of the dance, then the independents get in and they start dancing, they got no choice. The Democrats don't even have to ask. Well, they might, out of courtesy, the Democrats might say, "Oh, who are you?" And they can say, "We're independents." But as soon as the Democrats takes one more step, he understands, oh, it's Republicans. They send a new batch. Of course, let's drop now Democrats and Republicans. If it's the pros, drop out of the dance, and the independents come in, and so now they're dancing with the cons. And the cons take one good step, and they say, "Oh, what's your name?" And the independents say, "We're independent." And the con goes, "No." That is, life goes on, you understand? That's what I mean by the step. And the cons understand, oh, it's the pros. They're back under a different guise. In other words, life's still all right. It doesn't matter as long as the dance goes on. But there is a reality possible of independent thought, but you understand, it's got nothing to do with replacing one of the dancing partners. And it certainly has got nothing to do with getting into the dance and say, well, wait a minute, I'm an independent thinker, and I see this dance is up to no good. This dance is getting us nowhere. What I've got to do is get in there and make myself heard. That is not independent. Do you understand? If you get in there, if you shake the cage enough and stick out your tongue enough and make fun enough of the pros, and they go, well, I've had it, and they leave, and you can get in. You understand? You can call yourself anything you want to, but the cons, that is, that other part of life's energy, you're going to realize, oh, well, those other pros left. Oh, we got a new batch of pros. Come on in. That's it. Do you see that there is nothing resembling independent thinking? You are simply replacing, which is part of the way life works. You walk right along. But to say, well, those left and right feet, look where they've gotten us. We're in a hell of a mess here. What we need is independent foots. And so the independents get in, they replace the left foot. Here it goes. The left feet are driven out and the independents take over. And it goes over to the right foot, and it comes back to the left foot. They don't have to think about it. The independents can holler, we're not going to play that old game, but life goes like this. And you do play the old game. You're right there. You're going to play the part of the left foot. Looked at from one viewpoint, you're the ones that ran the left foot off. So you can holler, well, we'll never fall in the same trap as them, and suddenly, boom. And there's nothing wrong, because if you could do otherwise, then life would be going, boom, and then life would trip. And, of course, I can point out the obvious. If life trips, would you believe this? You're going to regret it. May I put it that way? May I put it to you that way? So the idea of independent is, from an independent view, try that, from an objective view, is non-existent. Do you understand? And for one more second, to stay with the political thing, the closest, and this makes no sense. Well, I guess the sentence makes sense, but as soon as I say it, you know it's not true. If there were a true operational reality to independence out in the triaxial dance, in the three-dimensional world run by polarized energy, if it were true, now back to the political scene, if there were independent thinkings, independent people in politics, and they did get in and take over and share power, I mean, in other words, it opened up. That the cons went, oh, we had enough and they left. The independents wouldn't go in. You understand? That if they kept raising hell and shaking the cages and sticking out their tongue to the two prevailing parties, the pros and the cons, to where finally the cons just got humiliated, dismissed, run out of town. If they were truly independent, they wouldn't come in. Well, it don't look like there's more to hear than that. It's simply a fact. And so you do understand that's not going to work. You know, to run one of the bad guys out of town, life operates this way. It understands if you run them out of town, you're going to take their place. And so if there were true independents, they would run one of them out, and so life would wait. You know, so on one foot and it's ready to go to the other, and you wouldn't come to the dance floor. And there's the pros. If the cons ran off, the pros there. And so you don't show up. Look how humiliating. You got to stand there the rest of your life. But see, that would be the closest thing that you could describe as a true independent. That they say, nah, the two prevailing forces, positive and negative, chocolate and vanilla, pro and con, no, they're not getting us anywhere. That is not a representation of original thinking, of progressive thinking. And if things could be arranged in such a way that chocolate left town, went off poor, everybody, half the population decided, all right, he's right, we hate chocolate, we hate Democrats. We've had enough of the pros, just get them out of here. And they left, and then the independents. And everybody kept waiting. Well. You know, you ran off part of them. You know, come on in. If it were possible to be operationally independent at that level, they would not come in to fill the void. But you do know. Don't keep looking off like you missed something. It's just, it's so crude and simple that I know that sometimes you want to look off and think even I got too weird for you. It's just that you know that's not going to happen. Would you do it? Would anybody do it? Would you try and get somebody out of a position? Try to run somebody out of a job? Try to do something that you seem to have it in for somebody, either an individual or institution, to the point that they vacated what position? That is, what energy transformation, but of what position they seem to have had. It's not even hardly worth talking about. Some of you looking blank. I mean, it makes me feel like my tongue is 2 or 3 months old. And so to have to say, if you went to the trouble to run somebody out, this is beyond obvious. Everybody knows you're going to be standing there, well, okay, I'll take over until you can find somebody else. Well, either that if you're playing Mr. Humble, or else you just run right in like, well, thank God we got rid of those bastards. Now I'll show you how it should be done. But if it was truly independent, if there was some independent third force operationally extant or operationally useful at the city level to where they could apparently pick out some aspect of life going on, which is always represented institutionally some way, that the wet party, the short people, they're confusing the economics in this country, the politics, the religion. And you went to such a degree that you got a lot of people apparently in the city to agree with, and they went, we've had it with them. We're not going to vote for them anymore. We don't want them to be a part of us. We wish they'd leave town, and so they go. Not one person passing for sane even thinks about, well, I wonder who will replace them. You know who's going to replace them, the people that help run them out. Or looked at it another way. Once they're run out by these independents, let's say, no one goes, well, I wonder what the independents will do now that they've succeeded in their great intellectual plan to get rid of some of the dross of our intellectual or spiritual life. Now, if they succeeded, they won't have anything to do. I wonder what they'll do next. Nobody ever thinks that. You know what they're going to do next. They're going to run in and jump in the Republicans' pants in their seats where they left. They abandon their position, you run right in. What would, for those of you that would play a more high-flying act, what would be the possibility of true independence, which is, as I admitted, is just, in a sense, another operational, synonymous description of revolutionist or new thinking? You would have to be, or what it would be if it were truly independent thinking, it would be that you were operating as an energy transformer, and you'd be dealing in, I don't mean this, of course, literally, but it has some validity, but you'd be operating like with a different current, a different voltage that would be on any earthbound positive or negative energy flow. that truly independent gets to the point that to talk about it verbally is like a soap bubble, burst and then turned inside out before you realize it will burst or something. Because to describe independent thought, to describe that there could be truly, and now I'm saying independent, and not the way that we're now inferring some other manifold possibility, that independent thought would have no dealing with the pros and cons of whatever the thought was about. If independent thought, again, don't take this too, it's the reality of what people in the dictionary and ordinary people mean by objective. Non-aligned, disinterested, impartial. I mean, the words the dictionary is full of them. People claim they are. And in certain cases, people are impartial, objective about something. But it's only things they have no interest in whatsoever. So, if you call that impartial, all right. But you cannot be impartial about something that you're not impartial about. Which is why independents do not work. I mean, that is not a fact in city life. But if it were, that's what I was going to try and get you to see. Now talking about the possibility that we're saying independent thought now, not as it's ordinarily called, but what would be the revolutionary, what would be, to get it back tangibly, would be your brain, literally, chemically, electrically at the base, of course, operating in a place that is non-essential. It would be literally a new place in your brain, but not just without a net. No trapeze. It's a whole new area. Do you understand then the validity of such words as impartial would then be possible? Man, it's not that weird to say it. It's a little weird to say it once I've set up, if you were following the first 30 or 40 minutes, that you do understand that it's not an attack and it's not me trying to prove that I'm right, but just simply see that independent thinking, in the same way as independent political parties, are misnamed. And I even hate to say that. That's as good a name as any, but you do understand they are not independent. All they're doing, all life is up to, is either the independents are just going to trail around on the edges, they're just going to be splinter groups. In other words, they're going to be involved with no substantial movement of energy in life. And if they do begin to be substantive in what they do, they cease to be in any way independent. And if they get so strong that they begin to replace one of the two prevailing, which is always two prevailing, you know that, and begin to replace them, they're no longer independent. Even if they ever were, which they weren't. But you understand, there's not even the pretext of it. If they run off the pros or the cons or the chocolate or the positive or the vanilla, they're going to replace them. They got to. Life would choke. But if it were what I'm inferring now, then now let's call it revolutionary independent. But you understand, I mean now, the reality behind independent, if it were described then, even though it made verbal sense to ordinary intelligence, what it would come out being, it would sound like it would be something between these, at least this will cover it, between these kind of extremes. If I got an ordinary intelligence to listen to this for the last 30 or 40 minutes, now I said, all right, it is possible that there would be something like truly independent thinking. And they went, okay, I heard the first part. It sounded like you've set up an attack that you're saying what is normally referred to as independent. I almost followed some of that, at least metaphorically. And so I go along, you're going to try and now describe what independent thinking would be. And I say yes. Now if I came up with, which I may try in a second, with something that verbally was rational, grammatically was rational, the sentence went, here's what it would sound like, though, operationally, the description. And I'll give you the extreme of a good grammatical spectrum. It would either sound like that it was, even if the sentence seemed to make sense, it would operationally to the person sound as though that the real essence of it was incomprehensible. Somewhere from that, either that to totally moot. And probably more weighted toward this end. That is, if you listen and thought, wait a minute, You're describing that you could think about things that you maybe didn't have an interest in. Yeah. Of course, they were really sharp. They might say, well, even things that you might have an interest in. Yeah. But you're describing that you could think about something that you may or may not have an interest in. Yeah, come on. And you could think about it in such a way that you, come on, say it, that you didn't have an interest in it. Yeah, what do you think of that? Of course, I knew what they'd think. They're going to go, that's dumb. And that's probably the most charitable thing they could say. That's the end down here. The other one would be, like I said, incomprehensible. If they hear the sentence, as I was not trying to be conflicting in my own presentation to you when I said that even though the sentence might grammatically make sense, that they could still find it incomprehensible. That is, I could say, or use what I was blaming on them. If I said, all right, it's to be able to think about something that you may or might not have some degree of interest in, and to be able to think about it in such a way that you had no interest in it. All right, the sentence makes some kind of sense. If we're playing symbolic logic, the sentence, grammatically and otherwise, makes sense. But you do understand, even if the person heard it in an operational sense, it's incomprehensible. Like, well, the sentence made sense, I guess, but why would you say that you could think about something that you may or might not have an interest in, or get really cheap and say, think about something that you had an interest in, and think about it in such a way that you had no interest in it. What the hell does that mean? But if they got past that, that's why I was describing a spectrum, trying to give you some, either from that, or if they didn't fall into that one, the rest of it would be, all right, I heard what you said, but they would find that to be, they would assume that if they looked up impertinent in the dictionary, would be this description. Like, well, if you could do that, what in the goddamn hell is the purpose of it? You follow that? That if you could think independently, what would be the purpose? Of course, right there, I might point out that 45 minutes ago, if I'd have gotten an ordinary intelligent person from the city, or any of you, and started this, I could have gotten them somewhere if I'd wanted to. I could have got a setup going with them. It wouldn't prove anything. To where when we got to this point, that 45 minutes ago, they would have thought that that's what independent thinking was all about. Until you got it down and you run through a certain kind of maze to where they were faced up to it, they'd feel like, God damn, boy, you wasted 45 minutes of my life. Because at first I thought this was going to be like, when you start talking about independent thought, I'd always had an idea. I was never that tied up in drugs and metaphysics and all that. But I kept thinking, if in some way you could really be objective in life, that you weren't all tied up in your ingrained prejudice that your family had put on your social pressures, that if in some way you could look upon life almost as a cold, clear-eyed, clinical, hard-nosed, and of course very intelligent like I am, that's why I'd like to be. Let me hear more. And 45 minutes later, it gets this description. And it'd be like, boy, have I been tricked. Because looked at from this view, what is the point? Why would you want to have independent thought if that's what we're talking about now? I'm speaking now for the ordinary person that went through 45 minutes of following this and felt like that would be it. That's what I want. Independent thinking. If you can tell me, and they would get to the point that if they did follow me down this little path for the last 45 minutes, and I point out independent thought would be at the simplest level. To be able to think about something that you're interested in and think about it in such a way that you're not interested in it. That is, that you are not dancing with pro or con. Even this good, intelligent person that listened to this and thought, well, what I heard you describe in the beginning of independent thinking, I like that. I'd be very interested. And they get to this point and you describe, I'd be able to think independently, be able to think about something you're interested in without being interested in it. That's what I mean. It's either somewhere between incomprehensible, or if they didn't get stuck in that, it's talk about moot, talk about impertinent, talk about irrelevant. That didn't even begin to cover it. It's just, the sentence makes sense, but that is just absolutely insane. I could present to you a Saturday high-flying theorem from that and say that true independent thought has no purpose or function save to those who do it. None. I don't think that you would, I'm not the only example in the world, but I don't think we could accuse me of being short on the verbosity department. But no one can describe why this is of any value. There is no way, with all sham humility, let me say, I'm not lacking in the ability to talk about this. So it's not my shortcoming. I'm saying you that no human, nobody can describe what would be independent thinking in such a way as it appears to have any purpose or function whatsoever. None. It does not, except to those who do it. Because independent thinking, if it exists, you understand, is outside, would you say outside again? Outside the dance floor. And it does not matter what the dance floor is, that it does not matter where is the neural patterns, the interest you have. I don't care what your interest is, music, art, politics, religion, family life, sex. It doesn't matter what it is. If you have an interest in it, it is driven in you by polarized energy. If you're alive and thinking. So it is divided into pros and cons, what you like, what you don't like. And many, 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 almost more than anybody could ever talk about, varieties of pro and con. But it is simply the nature of polarized energy. So what would be the purpose? Even though theoretically, even though verbally people say that they would be very, very interested in independent thinking. They would be very interested in being objective. And some people even claim to be, as we said, some people claim to be independent politically. And they would say, yes, I am. I'm working on that. People believe that certain drugs make them more objective. That, I can take certain drugs, even just something as fairly innocuous as I can smoke a joint. And as prejudiced and uptight as I am because of my curious and rigid upbringing, I can smoke a joint and I can smile at somebody of a different race or different religious persuasion. I'm in favor of being more objective, more open. And if you say, well, you're talking about sort of independent, that you could be your own man and you would not be, oh, I know what you're going to say. Yeah, I wouldn't be tied to my past and all the little idiosyncrasies, all the prejudice, yeah. Independent thinking. All right, yeah, I like that. I'd go for that. No, they wouldn't. Not because they're dumb. They can't. There's no way to escape from it. What they call independent thinking is to replace one of the dancing partners. Independent thinking, there is no way that can ever be described to where it sounds as though it has any purpose whatsoever. As I said, the most charitable, if you got an ordinary intelligence to listen to this, probably the most charitable would be, when I was describing it, would be this end. Oh, I don't know. Which would be the most charitable? That they thought that was incomprehensible or just totally moot? I guess the question's moot, isn't it? Well, I guess the most charitable they'd do is not try to turn you in or have you committed. Of course, if you told any ordinary person this, I got to tell you, you deserve to be committed. The theorem. And there is a practical purpose to this. The only reason I bring it up, to remember, there is what would be independent thinking, which is another way to describe this. Independent thinking has no purpose, no function, save to those doing it. That's it. Well, that's not it. Life got some purpose, or it wouldn't either have you doing it or allowing you to do it. But, insofar as the rest of them are concerned, the rest of the performers, the lion tamers, those in the circus band, those doing high wire acts, up there trying to do it, forget, with no net. That was to get you started. You're up there doing your act with no trapeze. If they look up, it's either incomprehensible. That is, nobody can look up and see somebody doing a trapeze act with no trapeze. So they're either going to look at it as being incomprehensible, like they look up and somebody said, "Did you see what I saw?" They went, "No." Another person says, "I didn't either." See, that's totally incomprehensible. Either that, they look up and see it, and they think, "What in the goddamn hell's the purpose of that?" So, at any rate, there is no known purpose. There is no way that anybody outside, and I don't mean just outside of us, we're not some kind of cosmically selected clique, but anybody doing this. If there's somebody over to some degree, and it's possible that people are doing it out by themselves without even knowing a term to do this, it has no known function. There'll be no one around them. Well, they might have some small reputation that people think, oh, so-and-so's pretty level-headed, and etc. But they got no idea that what he's doing serves any purpose. And if he tried to tell him what he was doing, then, of course, the purpose would quit being served and he'd be caught up in it. But for the split second he said, hey, watch this, and he tried to, think and talk to them without a trapeze, they'd go, wow. Now, I knew it was a little weird, but, the man finally went over the edge. They'd say, Waldo, do you really mean that? And he might suddenly go, oh, no, you misunderstood me. As soon as he saw him going, Because then he'd think, what was I doing? Back to the theorem. Independent thinking serves no purpose, no function, save for those who do it. Well, I'm almost out of tape. I could kill 4 minutes drinking this if you want. Do. Well, I just hate to start on something completely different. I do know 7 or 8 more Giesenslaw brother jokes. Well, on your own, if you want to. Some of you may have gotten, as they say in the South, you may consider that you got your plate filled today already. But you're surrounded not just by the dichotomy of everything being divided up into positive and negative, but I was trying to expand it a little bit. For anybody to have any interest, and let's take interest now a little bit beyond screwing and eating, what would seem to be civilized interest. Not that they're better, but interest in art, interest in politics, interest in religion, interest in social conversation, discussing the events of the day. Even if it doesn't appear to be pro and con, that you're sitting around discussing football or politics with your friends, people you know at the city level, it's not necessarily that you feel it's divided up into pro and con, that there's a whole bunch of your friends that are always taking some conservative side, but it is this, that one way, without ever using these terms, that people recognize one another, that you like somebody, that ordinary people like each other, is that they normally refer to their personality. Well, I like his personality. You just don't know him if you don't. I heard what you said about him, but you don't know the guy. Once you get to know him, I like his personality. Maybe you wouldn't, but I like his personality. One of the things you're saying is that his intellect, which of course talks, the talking intellect, being man, has hometown allegiances. And I mean hometown in the greatest sense. He will have hometown allegiances, if he's ordinary, down to the very chauvinistic level. That is, he is about prepared to fight, perhaps for his state. Yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania. What do you want to make out of it? And if not that, if he's a little more educated, a little more cityfied in the secondary world, he might not get so upset about fighting over Pennsylvania, but it's very likely if you said something about the United States. Yes, I'm an American. What? What about it? Part of everyone's personality are hometown allegiances. Now, if you get a little more secondarily sophisticated, you can find people now that will say they're kind of independents in a sense, the one-worlders. They're attacked by everybody throughout the world. Those who, they're the kinds of Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, they attack, well, you're the kind of people that start up the whole idea of the United Nations. You're the kind of people that want to do away with. So it gets up to a kind of a rarefied, it has no meaning in the city, but when I say rarefied, fewer and fewer people, almost independents, and they think, well, we shouldn't have any national boundaries, we shouldn't have any divisive religions, it should all be a one-world government. Those kind of people pick on on politics rather than religion. They just say we should do away with all politics and national boundaries, and that would stop all this fighting. That is one way, though, that the intellect stays. Even those who say that, notice they're the independents. That is not the prevailing attitude by any means. That is not even the kind attitude. That's not even part of the dance. It's just out on the fringe. They are truly independent at the mechanical level. But part of everybody's personality, part of how you're stable, part of how you know and institutions know who they are, when I say hometown right quick, expand it, It has to be a known allegiance, even if you don't like it. And it doesn't have to be just political. It doesn't have to be just somebody says, yes, I'm an Italian. What about it? It is that you're you. You have some known. If you're just ordinary and somebody says, you know, I never have liked you, you have some feeling about that, don't you? If you're sane, that is, there's a pro and con to this. I read it. Didn't you write an article in a magazine? Yes, I read it. Yes. That was the dumbest thing I ever read. There's a pro and a con. You've got some interest in it. Independent thinking would be that you had no recognizable allegiance to anything, which of course on the surface sounds very suspect to start with. You mean a man who would not defend his own hometown, his own nation, his own religion, his own race, his own sex? Keep going, keep going. Wait a minute. You know, that's about as insulting, that's about as annoying as you could do to ordinary intelligence. You mean a man who wouldn't defend any of that? And of course they think you mean that if somebody comes and says, aren't you Italian? I might be. Well, if you are, I'm going to punch you in the nose. That you're saying the kind of guy to say, go ahead and punch me? I'm not saying that at all. No. We're talking about secondary affairs. Your allegiance must be to yourself and what you think. And I've read something that somebody said, or somebody told me something you said that you thought, and I don't like it. What do you think of that? Independent thinking would be, of course, independent thinking, you wouldn't say anything, but if I had to say anything, independent would be thinking, when somebody says, I've heard all about some of the things you said, I even read something that you wrote, didn't you write that? I want to tell you, you tell you what I think. I think you're nuts, I think you're this and that, I think, no. What do you think of that? Truly independent thinking would be, nothing. So truly independent thinking, you wouldn't do that, but you understand that would be it. Not insulting, but independent thinking would be that you had no known allegiance. Forget hometown, forget race, religion. What seems to be you, which is your neural building site, is other people walk by and will kick dirt and go, so that's what you think. Don't you think so-and-so? Or they go, independent thought would be, of course, real independent thought is that you're no longer there. What they're doing is like they're kicking at the snake's skin, like, yeah, I remember you. All right, bye. If that's the way you feel about it.